So, all right, welcome everybody. Hopefully you got to enjoy the cartoon. Some of you may get the reference, some of you may not. If you get the reference, this will now make sense. My daughter watched me rehearse, and she said, "If it's a 30-minute talk, how simple could it be?" And now for the people who get the reference, I'm like, well, it's a lot easier than passing a law. So. And the other thing, the feature of this talk, so the most interesting things from the talk are all on this postcard, and I have a bunch of them, so when you leave, I will give you essentially the notes from the talk. Hey, welcome. I probably shouldn't call that out, people don't like that, do they? I'm really glad you're here. And you're just in time for me to say, so for those of you who are new to watching me speak, one of the things that I always do to keep it interesting is there is a unicorn hidden somewhere in this presentation. If you are the first person to jump up, wave your hands, and yell unicorn and point, you will win a prize. Okay? So you're looking for a unicorn. Awesome. All right, so that's fantastic. Just because this is fun. Jeff, I'm really glad you're here. I'm calling out everybody who comes in.
Glad to be here. I'm looking and hanging on every word.
Actually, and Jeff, just to more call attention, there's a unicorn hidden in the presentation. If you see it.
I get $1 billion?
No, you get a prize. The prize is not $1 billion. This is fantastic. So, I guess one of the things too, as long as we're just kind of improvising when people come in, do not be intimidated by interrupting me. Like, if you see the unicorn, that's the most important thing to the room. Whatever I'm saying, stop me. I'll give you a prize right on the spot. It'll be amazing. You're not the first people to wander in. Cool. All right. Well, let's get going. Let me set the timer really quick. All right, so we are doing how to get your ideas implemented at your organization. The organization is probably where you work, but it could be your church. It could be a nonprofit you volunteer at. Basically anywhere that there's a group of people that, one, your idea will impact, or two, you need those people to be on board and helping getting the idea done, right? So it's not ideas in your personal life, it's ideas in some sort of organization, probably your work. So who am I, for those of you who don't know me? So I'm Rick. This is my LinkedIn job profile. I have done a lot of things, and so we have to just focus on one of them. I was a Chief Innovation Officer for 3 years. And for those of you who know me as the work anniversary guy, this is actually where that started, so it was an innovation. So how did I become a Chief Innovation Officer? I basically just did innovative things at my company, and I don't know if you know the Peter principle, where they promote people into positions whether or not they actually are going to be good at that. So I did that. So one of the things I did is I was named on 10 different patents at my organization. That may sound impressive, but you'll notice the bottom right ones, I got patents for putting stars next to various shapes that are either outlined or filled in. So some of the other ones are actually more interesting, and some of them are very related, but it's really 3 patents on a lot, pretty much the same concept, but I color-coded it. So I became Chief Innovation Officer, and I had to figure out what is that, right? Because it's not something that everybody knows exists. And at first, one would think that it's, my job would be to have innovative ideas. It turns out that, that's not the case at all. What a Chief Innovation Officer, it's actually not good if they come up with ideas. What their responsibility is to encourage ideas from others and then help get them implemented. And so going back to why am I giving this talk, I think this is actually talking about what, I did for those 3 years. And it's definitely not about, getting patents in your name. Now, why a Chief Innovation Officer shouldn't come up with ideas on their own, and that's not their role, is captured in something called Carlson's Innovation Law. This is named for a guy named Curtis Carlson. who is the former CEO of the Stanford Research Institute. He was kind of amazing hero in his day. They were going to go bankrupt when he took over, and he turned the whole thing around and became a very respected organization. One of the kind of fun random facts, have you ever wondered why Apple's Siri is called Siri? No? No? All right. Well, watch the screen, don't watch me. So the Stanford Research Institute did all of the pioneering research that went into Siri, which was the first voice assistant. So they beat Alexa by like 3 years. They beat Google, they beat Microsoft. So that's a little bit of background of what kind of organization this is coming from. All right, so what is the law? So the law starts, innovation that happens from the top down tends to be orderly, but dumb. And this isn't like a radical anti-authority character. This is the CEO saying this, right? So, of someone who really pays attention to innovation. The law goes on to say that innovation that happens from the bottom up tends to be chaotic, and you guessed it, but smart. And so, this is all to say that frontline ideas matter. And so, it looks like Joel is not here. I was going to call him out and be like, "This is not for you, Joel." But if you're, frontline, or if you have multiple levels above you, your ideas matter. They're what move things forward. If you ever had a really dumb idea happen in your organization, it's probably because a senior leader came up with it on their own and pushed it down. If things have moved forward and things have gotten better, it's probably because that originated as a frontline idea. And this is just a well understood thing. This actually happened to me at the organization where I was Chief Innovation Officer. If I look back at all the innovations and all the stuff that happened during that time, the most impactful innovation, and by impactful I would describe that, when people used that feature, they would cry for joy. And I mean literally cry. And then the other side of that, which I claim is also good, even though it sounds bad, is when that feature broke, people got really angry. Right? And so that, this is something that mattered. That idea, which I look back on that time and was like, hey, that was the most amazing thing, that was an idea that a summer intern came up with. So, I've seen this happen in real life. The next thing that I think is real important from this talk is you can get your frontline idea implemented. Right, so it's not, you don't have to wait around for the the CEO to find you and find your idea. You can just take that into your own hands. That's what this presentation is about. This is going to be kind of like the guidebook for how do you do this. And in terms of the core message, if you want to remember one thing from this presentation, it's your ideas matter, and you can make them happen. Like, don't just be grumpy that people are ignoring your ideas. You can figure it out. You can remember it from this talk. You can look at the postcard, or there's plenty of other places on the internet you can figure out how to do this. All right, here we go. So we're going to start with some background. So since this is a tech conference, I can just bring up a bell curve. And what this is going to show is the reason why most ideas don't get implemented. Right? So this is just true, most ideas don't get implemented. So on the bell curve, over here are the bad ideas. Unlike questions, there really are bad ideas. There are a lot of okay ideas. There are a lot of good ideas. And then over here, we have the great ideas. Now, the problem is, and you probably know this from your own organization resources are limited. Like, there's only so much they can do. They're really busy with just the basics of keeping the lights on, keeping the money coming in, all that kind of stuff. And so there's not much innovation they can do. And so what that means is for your idea to get implemented, it needs to be a great idea, right? And that would be a problem because, going the probability angle here, you probably have an okay idea or a good idea and not a great idea. But not to worry, that's not actually a problem because I can share how to transform a good idea, or maybe even an okay idea, into a great idea. I have a friend who is, she owns a innovation consulting company, which is also a thing. And one of the things that she says is that no idea is born great. And she's much more of an expert on this than me. And so that would even go on further to say that this is the only way, right? So not only do you probably have to do this, but your idea probably isn't great until you go through this process. All right, so I promised to how you can transform an idea into a great idea. Let's do it with a diagram. So you have a good idea, and you want a great idea. And I've said, hey, you can transform it, but how do you do that? There are two things to know. First, you want to know the 5 qualities of a great idea. So you need to know what you're aiming for. And then the second thing you need to know is about collaborating with others to make your idea great. Because again, to spoil the whole talk, that's the magic, that you end up collaborating with others and make it great. We will start with the 5 qualities of great idea. All right, so number 1 needs to be clear. If you can't communicate your idea, you can't influence others to come on board with it, right? And it needs to be really clear. Guidance I would give here is, if you want to get an idea implemented at work, find a way to describe it to someone at home or one of your friends. Somebody who doesn't even have the context of the organization. If they're scratching their head being like, why does this matter? You probably haven't gotten it concise and haven't gotten it pithy, and it's a way which you can kind of practice in a safe place. But you definitely, if you can't communicate it, you can't get it to happen. So that's number 1. Now, while your idea being clear is necessary, you need to go beyond people just understanding an idea. If you want to get it implemented, you need them to be excited, right? And so that gets us to number 2. This sounds simple, but the path to getting people excited about ideas is to make them concrete. So if you know the term mock-up, creating a mock-up of it makes sense. If your thing is physical, like make one out of clay or wood or 3D print it, like some imagined version of it. If it's software, whatever paint tools you understand, like make a fake screen, make fake screens to show what it'll look like. If you're writing a book, make a fake cover and then put it through places on the internet where you can turn things into like 3D books that look like they're real, even though they're not. You can do that. Amazon does something, they're really famous for doing this. Amazon, before any feature gets approved or any sort of product change gets approved, they will write the press release as though it was done. And it's a whole different angle at the mock-up, but it's a way like imagine it helps people imagine, wow, that exists, because it's writing up all the benefits to customers and all that, and so that's just something that they do all the time. You could do something like that. If any of this is too intimidating, the absolute minimum is to write your idea down, right? So at least make it something that you could send to somebody afterwards to refer to. But whatever you do, this is actually a really important step. You want to mock it up. All right, number 3, a great idea benefits a lot of people. And one of the simple reason here is the more people your idea benefits, the more potential supporters you have that you can draw from, right? So if it's just a narrow idea that only it helps you, that's not going to work as well. Number 4 is a little dependent on your organization, but I can talk to you how to work around this. So organizations can't be doing everything in every direction all at once. They won't make progress. The better organizations will have quarterly goals or strategic initiatives, sometimes annual, but there's something the organization's working towards. A great idea lines up with that. And sometimes it's adjacent, but being able to tell the story of your idea in terms of what your organization is trying to achieve that year is one of the things that will make it great. If you don't work at an organization that does this sort of thing, a stand-in for this is figure out what your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss cares about. And that's sort of the same thing, but better that you have the organizational one, because and this is one of the reasons why organizations who do this are great, because then everyone you're talking to knows that this matters to the organization because they publicly said it. You're saying how you're helping with that. So that is good if you've got it. All right. And then the last one, and this is one that can trip people up because they'll think their idea is good, but it's not great. A great idea provides a lot more value than it costs. So ideas are risky, right? So you think it's great, but it may not actually work out. And so all the ideas that don't work out have to be paid for by the ideas that really worked out, right? And so you got to do that. Ideas, they add complexity often. So if your idea is to add a new process to your organization, well, now your organization's stuck with that process. Everything's a little bit harder, training's a little harder, and so you really have to think through making your idea, a lot more valuable than cost. And sometimes it's, finding a way to reduce the cost. but that's another characteristic of it. All right, so that was the 5 qualities of a great idea. Now we need to move on to collaborating. All right, so I'm just going to stop here and say collaborating is so valuable, kind of beyond you trying to get your idea all the way. No one, again, we're talking about organizations here. No one knows everything. Everyone has, for starters, a different role. And so, whatever your role is, you don't know what it's like to do their job. You don't know what the constraints are on them, what everything is there. So the different roles are going to bring these different perspectives. The other thing is people have different experiences. So you might think your idea is a really good idea because you did it at your last organization and it worked really well. And you're like, hey, I'll bring it here. It really might be that there's someone else in the organization that did the same thing at their previous organization and it didn't work, right? And just because, you could have gotten lucky or they could have gotten unlucky, but if you collaborate, now you can understand why is it that yours worked and theirs didn't, and then you can think about what that means for your organization. So very, very important, different experiences are important. And then, as you're probably all aware, we're all just wired differently. So there are some people that just look at the world full of possibility and everything that can be amazing. And there's other people who look at the world like, oh my gosh, that's risky and that's harmful, and did you think about that? And some people have latex allergies, you can't have balloons. There's really, both sides of this. And they're both valuable, right? Depending on what you're doing, you need that, and so you need to collaborate them in. And it's different things than that too. Like some people just are wired, and this might be a lot of this audience, for efficiency. Like they're like, see what's efficient, and I'm like, hey, it'd be faster, easier to do this. Other people are wired to think about people and how, what the relationships will be like and how that'll affect and whether that makes someone upset or something. Again, you need both, right? So collaboration is really, really important. Hopefully in talking about this as long as I have, one of the things I do is, and this will help you get your idea implemented, this kind of turns into like a solid tip. If you view other people as obstacles to your idea, so some people who aren't, they don't understand it the way I do and they don't like it. If you view other people as obstacles, you're not going to get your idea implemented. And you're probably not going to be liked that much either. If you view other people as sources of wisdom and other perspectives that you just meet with curiosity, that's going to make it more likely to get your idea implemented. It's also going to make you more likable, which is actually one of the things that will help you get your idea implemented. So this collaborating is really, really important. All right, so I do have a process on the bottom of the slide, so we'll go through that. I'd start with, once you have an idea, figure out who's going to be directly impacted, like whose lives in your organization is going to change. Find 3 of them and just run it by them and see what they say. Now, if they're all in a similar role, but they're going to bring the different experiences and kind of the different wiring. So that's step 1. Partly you'll learn some stuff from that, but it'll help you with number 2, which is figure out who's going to be indirectly impacted. So again, in any sort of organization of reasonable size, just changing something in one department is going to ripple out. Like finance is going to have to track something differently. Or the people who do training need to be aware that this happens. Or the people who, are on the phones with customers need to be aware because you change what's going to happen in the customer experience. And while it may not directly impact them, it'll ripple out. And you definitely want to figure out who are those people, and then talk to one of them in each one of those roles to kind of get a sense of what's going on. In this process, you're going to be getting these different perspectives. Now, number 4 is take what you just figured out and incorporate what you learned into the idea. The best way to do this is in however you made it concrete, update that. So draw new pictures or 3D print something slightly different with the extra handle that some department thought would be important. Make it concrete again, and then step 5 is repeat. Now you have a couple options here. You can actually go to the same people, or you could go to new people. They both have advantages. You go to new people, you're going to get new perspectives. If you go to the same people, there's a side benefit of, in addition to making your idea better here, when you go to somebody, ask for their feedback on your idea, they tell you what they think, you put that feedback into your idea, you create a new mock-up, you put it in front of them and say, what do you think now? That's someone who's probably going to become a fan, right? And again, you're trying to build support in the organization, you can get buy-in that way. All right, now, that's all kind of the happy path. But one thing to note is there are going to be negative people. You will run into somebody who absolutely hates your idea. So let's talk about that. And the important thing here is your goal in that process is not to create an idea that no one hates. And in fact, I would say if no one hates it and no one's enthusiastic about it, you've lost. So it's much better to have enthusiasm and hatred, like you've tapped into something that matters, right? Than it is to have a bunch of people be like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so so don't worry that there's haters. And one way to put this is you can choose to ignore someone's concerns. Just make sure you understand their concerns first, right? So don't just be like, hey, they're negative. Like, try and figure out what can you take from them to make your idea better. Because ideas are change. Not everyone likes change. Some people hate change. And some change, while good for the organization, is actually bad for some people, right? So going back a number of years, someone had the idea that instead of us going to the bank to cash our checks, we could take pictures of the checks using our app, and it would just move up. So I would think that was a great idea, right? But if you talk to the tellers in your organization while you were trying to implement that, they would tell you all the reasons why no, people want the confidence of a person and they wouldn't. And being aware of that is useful. And I guess if you kind of think of what the value of the folks who hate it are, one, you can maybe come up with something that might mitigate that. So you're like, hey, we've got this idea, it is going to impact the tellers, but we can put in a training program, and I've done a little research as to how you reskill people and this way of thinking, and so that will help move your idea forward, and this may take it towards great. The other thing is sometimes there just maybe those objections. Being able to, when you're presenting your idea, say, I know it's going to harm this, so you're not being blindsided, but saying this is an acceptable or necessary cost. Right? So again, your idea is going to be so much, again, the ideas don't need to have everybody on side, but you acknowledging it's bad for these reasons here, but we know this and it's worth it, you're going to be much more compelling than if you're in a meeting, you present your idea, and then somebody in the back says, well, that's done because blank. And you're like, again, that's going to get in the way of implementing your idea. All right, so we're, I don't know how far we are, but I've shown, how you do it, how you go from a good idea to a great idea, and you might ask, what happens next? It gets implemented. Or maybe not. Sometimes it does. Sometimes your idea is just so great that some leader will come along and go wow, that's amazing, that'll save money, and we put it in. But actually, earlier in the talk, I did obscure something. I didn't exactly lie. But I said, if you wanted to get it implemented, you need it to be a great idea. But one detail is not all great ideas get implemented. And as my teenage son would say, wah, wah. Or as we used to say back in the 19s, frowning face. So, all right, so this is sad, and I have failed you as a presenter. Yeah, here's a good idea. It might not happen. But I'm going to try and defend this and say, so imagine you get to this point. You had an idea, it was great, you made it great, you went through that whole process, you made it great, and then your organization just throws a wall in front of it and it doesn't happen. Just think about what happened. You went out and talked to a bunch of people, okay? And you asked them how their jobs worked, essentially, right, in relation to this idea. You now know so much more about your organization. That is going to make you more valuable. And then the other thing that happened was in talking about those people, and when you show people that you're interested in them, they like that. So you built relationships, right? So it wasn't just this transaction, you got a conversation that went away. So you now know more about the organization, you have a bunch more relationships. I would claim this is a good thing, right? So you don't actually lose. But I also don't want to fail as a presenter. So there's more slides. So, all right, let's look at the situation. So you have your good idea, you run your amazing process, and you hit a brick wall. There are actually a couple options for what you can do here. We are going to start with what I call the persistence option, which with enough persistence, you can get to this mini implementation. All right, so so persistence is effort, right? And so what I'm gonna now share is how, you have your regular job. what's a playbook to really try and focus your efforts and make the most of the fact that you're going to have to put more time to get this over the wall. All right, so it all starts with knowing the 3 groups that are especially important to what's happening. And I'm going to put them out there in order from most important to least important. But keep in mind, these are the 3 important groups, so they're all important. But starting with the top makes sense. All right, so you want to get the people who are going to be directly impacted on board. This group is going to be really good at sabotaging your idea. So they can tell, they're the experts. They can tell people it's dumb, and even if it starts to get implemented, they're the ones that can just not do it. So you need to figure out how to get, some or all of them excited. The next group is the people who are actually going to do it, right? So the kind of their special wall they can put in front of you is, some leader can say, hey, this is a thing we should do, and then for some reason that group just keeps delaying, right? Something else comes up, something else is more important, they keep putting it off. And so they do have that power even when told to do things, so you need to get them on side. And then lastly, this is the most obvious group, the influential people. So whatever leader, senior leader, CEO, whoever you've got there, you need to get them on board too. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they're in the position to block your idea. Now, I'm like, duh, you need to win support from these people, but how? So that's the other half. So there are 3 things to do to get them on side. One is, at this point, articulate how the idea supports their goals. So all the way up to this point, you could have really just been talking about how it affects you or affects the people that are directly impacted, but really figure out what are their goals, what is it that matters to them, reframe everything you're doing specifically for each one of these groups is an important step. And in doing that, you'll have conversations and you'll learn a little bit more about why that is or isn't working. And I would say, even if you have a great idea, if you're blocked, you have to continue to adapt it. And this is actually a really interesting part in the process where you might need to go backwards. So you might have this really, really great idea, and in order to win support from these groups, this is where it starts to look a little more like a law, you have to backtrack a bit, and you may have to put things in your idea that aren't as good as they could be, or scale some things back so you can win support from these groups. But for these particular groups, this is worth it to get through the block. And then lastly, figure out how to make it their idea. And so you don't want, the goal is not that this is your idea and everyone's going to, and we'll talk a little bit about this more later too, but you don't want to get credit for it. And a lot of people are concerned, people stole my idea, or they give it, you want people to steal your idea if you want to get it done. And if you really want to win this game, you want to get those 3 groups angry at each other because each one of them stole the other one's idea. Right? So you're like, I can't believe that executive is taking credit for that idea that we courageously knew to implement, and then the implementers are taking credit for this thing that we came up with while we were that would be amazing, right? Because then you've got people that are enthusiastically going after it. You just step back and let it go. And again, we'll talk about it later. Now, this is the persistence track, and so it takes effort. I'm not going to make this say that this is necessarily easy. This is because you care. You've got to do this. These 3 things for all these 3 groups. Keep going. This is because you really care. Some of you may not want to do that, right? You might want to know what's a faster way. And I mentioned there were a couple ways. There is also the useful hacks route. And so it turns out there are 3 useful hacks. And so if you don't want to play the persistence game, try these. The first hack is by far the best. So don't get your expectations up that they're going to get better and better. The first one is the one, and then I'll give you a couple other ideas. So the best thing to do is ask for forgiveness, not permission. All right, we got some laughing there. And the reason, there's a good reason for this. If you've got a great idea that's going to have a really positive impact on your organization, and people are doubting it or getting in the way, the best way to show your organization that your idea is a great idea is to do it, and then great things happen. And at which point, how are they going to stop you now, right? So that is, this is amazing. One of the things that you also notice in this talk, I have not yet talked about your manager. And the reason, I'm sorry if there's managers here, this is important to know too. Managers are, and it's not their fault, managers are incented to get in the way of ideas. So they're taking a group of people and they're trying to, take that group of people and have them efficiently complete tasks that that manager is then measured on. If you go off and do some other idea, you're not doing your task you should do. And if that manager doesn't have power to talk to all those different people in those different roles I talked about before. And so that's, they're not even going to be, great at that, like you're wandering off and doing that. And so very often your manager's not going to be supportive. And so going and ask your manager, can you do this? And it's like, no. And there's even some managers that are just bad. There's some managers that will support and they'll all be fine and we'll be happy you're doing this, but there's other managers that aren't. And one of the things, if you don't like your job because you have a difficult manager and because they don't let you do this stuff, this is bold, and if, and I'd say, I will look you in the eye if you come to me and this doesn't work out, and I'm going to tell you this. But like one of the things, this is the best path to get out from under that bad manager. Right? So you have a great idea. You've talked to people all over the organization. You understand why this is going to have a really big impact on your organization. You go and do the idea. And then your manager gets really angry at you, probably publicly. They're probably going to have to tell their manager. Like, it's going to be obvious that your manager is really upset at you for doing something that is now demonstrably amazing. One way or another, you're not going to report to that manager. And it may depend on the manager's manager and how exactly the story turns out, but you're better off even if you get fired, is my claim. And then, again, I stick on points that I think are really important. So one other thing I would say to this is, so remember the summer intern that came up with the absolute best idea that happened while I was Chief Innovation Officer? She, I don't know, she didn't actually, so I probably just find the stories. She didn't need to get forgiveness, but she didn't get permission. And so by the time the idea came to me, so her manager in no way, said this was okay. By the time the idea reached me, it had already done, and I was sitting there looking at like, wow, that was amazing, yes. And all because, for whatever reason, I just went and did it. And so that is a really, really, really important tool. Again, you can go that other path. I get you persistence if this isn't your thing, but if you can find this. And I guess one last, a couple cautions to make sure you don't shoot yourself in the foot too bad. One thing you can do is imagine you were the owner of your organization, if that makes sense, it was a company. So imagine you were the owner. Would you want someone in the organization to just get this done? If as the owner, you just kind of like, duh, of course I'd want someone to do this, that's a good sign. If on the other hand you're like, well, no, she crashed the company car, there's some sort of bad thing, then don't do it. But so you can think about that. And then the other thing I would caution, this is actually what the intern did. Look at your idea and find the smallest possible way to do it, like the smallest example that would show positive outcomes. And so in the case of the intern, like they did the very smallest thing that can be done. They did this one instance of it, and that was what showed us amazing. So you can keep it small, but again, this is an amazing technique. All right, on to the less useful hacks, but they're still good. Hack number 2 is make others the heroes. So on the previous persistence slide, I talked about, figure out what they're interested in and try and match that up with them. This is different. So everybody has internally, this desire to be loved, and people don't often say that at work, but that is the thing, right? So they want people to think they're heroes and they're amazing. Figure out the story by which those 3 groups of people are the heroes. So like for the frontline employees, like figure out the story by which customers are just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing, this is so much better than it used to be, or so much better than the competitor. The implementers, figure out the story by which the frontline employees are coming to them and bringing them cupcakes, or whatever however they show their appreciation. And the leaders can be kind of the harder one here, like, how does that leader stand out? If there's one senior leader, coming through this, how do they stand out amongst their senior leadership team? If you've got a CEO, like, can they go talk in the community about this amazing thing their company did, and that other companies and CEOs would love them? Or even how would the frontline employees love that CEO? Because CEOs, they have to make hard decisions and they aren't always loved, but they want to be. And if you've got an idea that'll help, that's great. So figure out how to make them the heroes is a really useful thing. All right, hack number 3 is a long-term hack. So it's not super fast, but it's actually there are a lot of amazing things to it. So one thing to do is embrace other people's ideas, right? So we were talking about your idea, but everything we talked about works with other people's ideas. Like, it doesn't have to be your idea for you to go do those things. And to the extent you're encouraging and you help other people get ideas done, you're building all those relationships, you're learning about the organization, you're building a huge fan of the person whose idea it is, like you're getting stuff done. And it's, if you're really thinking about your career, so you've got, we're diverging a little from the topic of the talk, but you've got your idea, but if you say you know a dozen people at work, if you are really looking out for ideas from other people, you know those dozen people, like it's probable that someone you know has a better idea than the idea that you're trying to get done. And if you just go, hey, why don't we run with that, you're probably more likely to get it implemented. And if we really take it back to the beginning, having ideas is not, and this goes back to the credit thing, like people are like, hey, I want to get credit for my idea. I would flat out say, no, that's useless. Lots and lots of people have ideas. Ideas aren't, like organizations aren't going, oh no, how do we have ideas? Organizations are saying, how do we get ideas done? And if you become known as the person that can take an idea wherever it came from and can get it over the line and make it happen, like that is amazing for your career. That's what's going to move you forward. Not that you had this one off idea that, again, whosever idea you make happen, they're going to notice that you made it happen more than they're going to notice whoever it came from. So this is and ultimately, as you get good at that, you're going to be getting better at getting your ideas done too. So it will play it back. So those are the 3 useful hacks. Here's the full model. So how you take the, whatever idea you got, make it great. Your different paths to implementation. And we'll end with a reminder of the core message. So your ideas matter. And you've got the power to get them done. You can do all of these things. Thank you. All right, so it is Q&A, and I find Q&A is usually best with a diagram. So yeah, I think we probably have about 10 minutes. Yeah, you know more than that. Any questions? And actually, one of the things I can do, I'm not sure how to do this exactly well, so it's just start passing around note cards. So if you want a note card, grab one. If you don't, and somehow figure out how to wiggle that way. And whatever doesn't, just kind of leave the ones in the back that are extra. All right, question?
So where's the unicorn?
All right, so what we're going to do, so we have actually a little time between the lightning talk, so I'm not going to answer your question. Anyone who wants to find the unicorn and win the prize, stay after the Q&A, and I will go through the slides slowly, and I will make sure we get to the slide with the unicorn and somebody will win. So, it's in there. All right, that's usually question number 2. All right, other questions?
I know my idea is the best. Why don't you talk about it?
All right. So, are you willing to be unanonymous? So, Paul's question is: if you know your idea is the best, why do you need to talk to other people? Good luck. It's fun. So, if you can pull it off, that's awesome.
Well, in step 2, when you're getting, one of the 5 qualities of a great idea is getting it clear, making it clear. In a Google Doc, in like a project template and whatever, it gets a name, right? It's like your idea, and you're shopping around, and so how does it look to turn that into making it other people's idea? It's like a project proposal that somehow you're gonna subvert into people's consciousnesses to make it their own, so they like take ownership of it.
All right, so I think the question is, if you have an initial Google Doc with your name on it as the creator, how do you make it feel like it's other people's ideas? One is the content is so much more important than the name on it. So when people see their idea in there, if I just really push this all the way, administrative assistants can create documents for executives, all right? And then they feel like, they're directing it. So I claim no one's gonna look at the creator and feel, like because you created the document, it's your idea, they're gonna look and see, are things I said in the idea reflected there, and things I care about, probably more importantly. And they will, again, and everybody, everybody kind of, as much as I'm saying like don't worry about getting credit, everybody kind of naturally does. And so people will naturally feel like they're not going to go look at the creator and be like, oh darn, it wasn't me. They're going to look at the content and be like, yeah, that's my thing. And then you have to be subtle about it, right? You can't be like, you can't send an email that says like, did you look at my document? You send, did you look at the, improve the payroll process document? And that will generally. And if you really get called on it, I guess one other tip is you can say, sure, I started it off, but it's, and you can do this publicly if you're called to talk about it. Like, this isn't my idea, this is like the whole group's effort, this is the whole company, there's, all these people, you can actually just keep saying that. And people want to believe that, and they will.
So when you're sharing your idea with other people to see if it is a great idea, do you have tips to encourage honesty and avoid like a bias of people just like wanting to reaffirm you because maybe they like you and so they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea?
Yes. So I guess the tip is actually in how you worded it. So you said, when you're showing it to people to see if it's a great idea, just changing your mindset on that. Like, you are not trying to show it to people to see if it's a great idea. Like, you can even just start off with saying, I know this isn't good enough to implement. You're showing it to them to try and get them to improve it. And so kind of it isn't like, basically I guess the simple tip is, oversimplifying it, is you don't show up saying, what do you think of my idea? You show up saying, I'm really curious about how this idea would impact you and what could make it better. So you're just shifting the question you're at. So yeah, you're not looking for validation would be the mindset. Jeff.
Put a little hack on that one. You sit there and say, what did I get wrong in this?
Cool. Jeff's got a great tip for you.
They tell you what was wrong, and you send it back to them, and it's like, okay, so is this correct? And that actually then gives them sign off on your idea.
Nice. Yeah, that's an amazing tip. Thank you, Jeff.
So you talk about like embracing other people's ideas, and if you're also already in a position of leadership, what could you do to encourage people to share their ideas and start talking about them, especially if they don't not implement it, so they just stop bringing up their own ideas?
So yes, this is not a talk for executives, but clearly what I did that mattered. So there's a whole different talk about that. Kind of the simplest answer there is, one of your problems as an executive is that you're going to get that ton of ideas coming at you. And people aren't going to know this process or aren't going to want to bother doing it. And so you're going to get all these ideas that really aren't worth doing. And as a leader, your job is to be a good steward of resources and make sure you don't do things in the company that don't make sense. And so what the advice to leaders is that your role is not to do every idea, but to care enough about your employees that you're willing to make sure they understand why an idea isn't going to happen. And that does take an investment of time, but if you're really like a top company culture, it's that step where you're like, okay, I understand your idea, I understand this matters, and what's getting in the way of that happening is we're focused on the strategic initiative and that doesn't fit, or we need ideas to make 3 times more money than they cost, ballpark say, and this doesn't come close to that. Help them understand, or another, there's a whole talk on this. Another angle, if you don't want to go there, is to help them figure that out themselves. So again, you can actually step them through this process, and you can say, hey, that's a great idea, but it would affect purchasing. And I'll bet these other people on your team probably have a perspective. Have you talked to them, at which point they say no, and you just send them on their way. And either a lot of employees won't care enough to actually do that, but you weren't the one who said you can't do it, you empowered them to go talk to them. Or they'll talk to those people and they'll find out why it wasn't a good idea. Again, you weren't the one who seemed like the mean leader. And then when they come back to you again, if you find a way to get them to figure it out themselves, that's a really good leader move. And they may actually figure out how to make it a great idea too. And they come back to you and say, I talked to this person and I did this and I did that and now this and now this. Now you're looking at it going like, now that makes sense. And then you're back on the process and you've won. So, great.
My question was kind of related. What's your opinion on the suggestion box?
So the anonymous suggestion box is a disaster. So this is all about human relationships and getting to know people. Like this idea that you could, with no accountability, just like throw something in a suggestion box and be like, I'm expecting you to do something about it. That's terrible, right? So if you're going to have a suggestion box, you need to have, or the digital equivalent, you need to have the person's name on it. That's the negative side. The positive side, which this sort of helps with, but you can find other processes, the manager really is a block. And again, no fault of their own. And so finding a way to get ideas past the manager, it's like if you have a sales team and they use Salesforce, and some frontline employee has an idea on how to improve Salesforce and make it better, their manager is going to be like, oh my gosh, you're wasting time, you should be making more calls, right? But their manager's manager is like, oh my gosh, I'm paying 100 salespeople, how can we make them all more efficient? And they don't, that your manager only has the 5 people on their team and they have to make their goal with those 5 people. That manager, if you go to them and say, hey, could you pull one salesperson off to make everybody 20% more efficient going forward? That manager's gonna be like, oh my gosh, yes! So you do need a process to skip. And there are skip level, just one-on-ones on some cadence are a better thing, or really finding a way that the senior leaders make it clear that frontline employees can come talk to them is more of a process than an anonymous suggestion box. Is that enough of what? Cool. Kenny.
Not a question. I think I found a unicorn. It was a promise the whole time. Was it the bricks and the plus?
No.
Oh, dang it.
That is creative.
Yeah.
So if there's not a 3-way tie, so I brought 3 prizes in case there was a tie. If there's not a 3-way tie, I'll give you one of the prizes.
Oh, okay.
So, cool. Still get that, right?
I mean, lightning talks are starting at 4:30 and Simon.
Oh my gosh, I'm late. Sorry. Thanks, everybody.